Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in sophomore English. We are in our hymnals in Unit 6, that unit of epics and legends and myths. And we now turn on 1188 1189 to what we will call parody, making fun of. And we're going to take a look at a couple of mock kind of epics, mock legends. The first one that we'll be looking at here is Twain's Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Now we're only going to be looking at a brief cutting from this really amazing novel. Let's make sure that we get this notion of parody out of the way right away. On 1189, a parody, get it in your notes at 2B. A parody is a humorous work in which the author imitates the style or ideas of other works in an exaggerated or ridiculous way. For example, you can have parody of style, conflict, characters. Parodies, although humorous, can also convey a theme or an insight about life. Parodies point out the faulty attitudes, ideals, values of past and current society. As you read a parody, you want to look for words, sentences that exaggerate and mock ideas from other literary works. You may be familiar with an artist named Weird Al Yankovic that for many years made a living off of making parodies of, or kind of satirical videos of really important videos. So like a Virgin Madonna's famous song became like a surgeon, Michael Jackson's Beat It became Eat It, and so on and so on. For those of you that know anything about this kind of thing, again, you're playing around with kind of ridiculing or making fun of. We're going to see this happening now in a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. We're also going to be comparing worldviews, just like we did with our previous two readings of the Arthurian motif on 1189, so you want to pay attention to that. Pay attention to the vocabulary on 1190 and those vocab words there. Let's meet Mark Twain one more time. We obviously met him in our freshman year. The dates on 1191, 1835 to 1910. Samuel Clemens, later one famous Mark Twain, grew up in the small Mississippi River port of Hannibal, Missouri. He left school early to learn the printing trade, later found work as a steamboat pilot. After the Civil War, he headed west, hunting for silver in Nevada, gold in California, while writing accounts of his travels. In 1870, Twain married Olivia Langdon and began to raise a family. Settling in Hartford, Connecticut, he penned his popular boyhood tale, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and then, of course, following The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. He took his name, of course, from a riverboat cry, Mark Twain, meaning the water was deep enough for safe passage. Now, this cutting comes from a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Let's get some background information out of the way. I'm reading with you in 1191. The days of King Arthur are typically depicted as a time of great deeds and noble characters, as we just saw in our study. Twain paints a different picture of this time. Hank Morgan, the hero of Twain's Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, is a 19th century Yankee or New Englander. Hank has all the shrewdness often associated with New Englanders. His ingenuity is tested, though, in King Arthur's Court. Now, a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court will make fun of or satirize the utopian days of King Arthur. The story of Hank Morgan, a 19th century American who time travels to 16th century England, is a powerful analysis of such issues as monarchy versus democracy, but the novel is also fresh and funny. Hank, a resourceful mechanic with a can-do Yankee spirit, is concerned with the inequities he sees between the aristocracy and commoners of medieval England. Using democratic values and technology, he attempts to transform the country in spite of Merlin's jealousy, animosity from the Knights of the Round Table, and the ignorance and superstition of the people. Because of a spell Merlin casts, Hank sleeps for 1,300 years before he reawakens in 19th century Connecticut. Read with me the background information up on page 1193. The practical Hank Morgan is a manager of an arms factory in Connecticut in 1879. One day in a fight with an employee named Hercules, he's knocked unconscious. Awakening in a strange place, he finds himself the prisoner of a knight in armor, Sir Kay, who of course we know of from our earlier study. On their way to King Arthur's Court, Hank meets Clarence, a friendly young page. Hank is unsure of where he is, and he's astonished when Clarence tells him that it's June 19th in the year 528. Hank knows that a solar eclipse occurred at noon on June the 21st in the year 528, but that no eclipse is predicted for his own year. If an eclipse occurs, he reasons, it will confirm that he has traveled in time. In the meantime, he's taken to a dungeon to await execution. We are in chapter 5 of this novel, An Inspiration. Now, of course, you can already write down at 3a. Any text that you are familiar with that has to do with time travel, it in many ways will borrow heavily from this really famous novel that is as well really kind of humorous and funny. But while we're laughing, we want to pay attention to the kinds of things that Twain is pointing out about differences between, for example, English and American society, we might say. All right, I'm with you on 1193. Let's just enjoy the reading now. A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court.
From A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Chapter 5. An Inspiration. I was so tired that even my fears were not able to keep me awake long. When I next came to myself, I seemed to have been asleep a very long time. My first thought was, well, what an astonishing dream I've had. I reckon I've waked only just in time to keep from being hanged or drowned or burned or something. I'll nap again till the whistle blows, and then I'll go down to the arms factory and have it out with Hercules. But just then, I heard the harsh music of rusty chains and bolts. A light flashed in my eyes, and that butterfly, Clarence, stood before me. I gasped with surprise. My breath almost got away from me. "What?" I said. "You here yet? Go along with the rest of the dream. Scatter." But he only laughed, in his light-hearted way, and fell to making fun of my sorry plight. "All right," I said resignedly. "Let the dream go on. I'm in no hurry." "Prithee, what dream?" "What dream? Why, the dream that I am in Arthur's court, a person who never existed, and that I am talking to you, who are nothing but a work of the imagination." "Oh, la, indeed. And is it a dream that you're to be burned tomorrow? Ho, ho, answer me that." The shock that went through me was distressing. I now began to reason that my situation was in the last degree serious, dream or no dream.
1194.
I knew by past experience of the lifelike intensity of dreams that to be burned to death, even in a dream, would be very far from being a jest, and was a thing to be avoided by any means, fair or foul, that I could contrive. So I said beseechingly, "Ah, Clarence, good boy, only friend I've got, for you are my friend, aren't you? Don't fail me, help me to devise some way of escaping from this place." "Now do but hear thyself. Escape? Why, man, the corridors are in guard and keep of men-at-arms." No doubt, but how many, Clarence? Not many, I hope." "Full a score. One may not hope to escape."
20.
After a pause, hesitatingly, "And there be other reasons, and weightier." "Other ones? What are they?" "Well, they say—" "Oh, but I daren't, indeed, and indeed I daren't." "Why, poor lad, what is the matter? Why do you blench? Why do you tremble so?" "Oh, in sooth, there is need. I do want to tell you, but—" Come, be brave, be a man. Speak out, there's a good lad." He hesitated, pulled one way by desire, the other way by fear. Then he stole to the door and peeped out, listening, and finally crept close to me and put his mouth to my ear and told me his fearful news in a whisper, and with all the cowering apprehension of one who was venturing upon awful ground and speaking of things whose very mention might be freighted with death. "Merlin, in his malice, has woven a spell about this dungeon, and there bides not the man in these kingdoms that would be desperate enough to essay to cross its lines with you. Now, God pity me, I have told it. Ah, be kind to me, be merciful to a poor boy who means thee well, for an thou betray me, I am lost." I laughed, the only really refreshing laugh I had had for some time, and shouted, "Merlin has wrought a spell? Merlin, forsooth? That cheap old humbug, that maundering old ass? Bosh, pure bosh, the silliest bosh in the world. Why, it does seem to me that of all the childish, idiotic, chuckle-headed, chicken-livered superstitions that oh, curse Merlin." But Clarence had slumped to his knees before I had half finished, and he was like to go out of his mind with fright. "Oh, beware! These are awful words. Any moment these walls may crumble upon us if you say such things. Oh, call them back before it is too late.
So let's pause for a moment. We have Harold, of course, who is in this situation, or Hank, who's in this situation, and he asks Clarence for help. Now, Clarence, of course, is deeply concerned because Merlin has supposedly put a spell on the castle, and will then, of course, it's going to go badly for anybody who helps Hank. Notice the distinction here. Hank, a 19th century Connecticut Yankee, right? He's like, superstition, it's all garbage. Notice Clarence, though, is deeply worried. He's like, dude, you better take back the words that you just spoke, or we're going to be in some serious trouble. Let's go ahead now and continue. What will happen next?
Now, this strange exhibition gave me a good idea and set me to thinking. If everybody about here was so honestly and sincerely afraid of Merlin's pretended magic as Clarence was, certainly a superior man like me ought to be shrewd enough to contrive some way to take advantage of such a state of things. I went on thinking and worked out a plan.
Here's his plan.
Then I said, get up, pull yourself together, look me in the eye. Do you know why I laughed? No, but for our Blessed Lady's sake, do it no more. Well, I'll tell you why I laughed. Because I'm a magician myself. Thou? The boy recoiled a step and caught his breath, for the thing hit him rather sudden, but the aspect which he took on was very, very respectful. I took quick note of that. It indicated that a humbug didn't need to have a reputation in this asylum. People stood ready to take him at his word without that. I resumed. I've known Merlin 700 years, and he... 700? Don't interrupt me. He has died and come alive again 13 times and traveled under a new name every time. Smith, Jones, Robinson, Jackson, Peters, Haskins, Merlin. A new alias every time he turns up. I knew him in Egypt 300 years ago. I knew him in India 500 years ago. He is always blethering around in my way everywhere I go. He makes me tired. He don't amount to shucks as a magician. Knows some of the old common tricks, but has never got beyond the rudiments, and never will. He is well enough for the provinces, one-night stands and that sort of thing, you know, but dear me, he oughtn't to be set up for an expert. Anyway, not where there's a real artist. Now look here, Clarence, I'm going to stand your friend right along, and in return, you must be mine.
1196.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to get word to the king that I am a magician myself, and the supreme grand muckamuck and head of the tribe at that. And I want him to be made to understand that I am just quietly arranging a little calamity here that will make the fur fly in these realms if Sir Kay's project is carried out and any harm comes to me. Will you get that to the king for me? The poor boy was in such a state that he could hardly answer me. It was pitiful to see a creature so terrified, so unnerved, so demoralized. But he promised everything, and on my side, he made me promise over and over again that I would remain his friend and never turn against him or cast any enchantments upon him. Then he worked his way out, staying himself with his hand along the wall, like a sick person. Presently, this thought occurred to me. How heedless I have been. When the boy gets calm, he will wonder why a great magician like me should have begged a boy like him to help me get out of this place.
Right? Not the irony.
He will put this and that together, and will see that I am a humbug. I worried over that heedless blunder for an hour, and called myself a great many hard names meantime. But finally, it occurred to me all of a sudden that these animals didn't reason, that they never put this and that together, that all their talk showed that they didn't know a discrepancy when they saw it. I was at rest then. But as soon as one is at rest in this world, off he goes on something else to worry about. It occurred to me that I had made another blunder. I had sent the boy off to alarm his betters with a threat, I intending to invent a calamity at my leisure. Now, the people who are the readiest and eagerest and willingest to swallow miracles are the very ones who are hungriest to see you perform them. Suppose I should be called on for a sample. suppose I should be asked to name my calamity. Yes, I had made a blunder. I ought to have invented my calamity first. What shall I do? What can I say to gain a little time? I was in trouble again, in the deepest kind of trouble. There's a footstep. They're coming. If I had only just a moment to think. Good, I've got it. I am all right. You see, it was the eclipse. It came into my mind in the nick of time how Columbus or Cortez or one of those people played an eclipse as a saving trump once on some savages, and I saw my chance. I could play it myself now, and it wouldn't be any plagiarism either, because I should get it in nearly 1,000 years ahead of those parties.
So let's pause for a second. So you've got Hank now, who has, first of all, he's boasted that, oh man, I'm a whole lot better magician than Merlin. I've known Merlin for hundreds of years, and I'm way better than him. And I'm going to bring down some serious calamity if you guys don't let me out. The young boy Clarence leaves. Of course, he begins to think about it. Well, if Clarence had half a brain, he would have said, if you're such a great magician, then why don't you just walk out of this prison? And then it occurred to him, I'm going to be in some serious trouble because they're going to ask for me as a great magician to do something kind of like that magicians do, right? And what am I going to do? And then all of a sudden it occurs to him, I know I've got it, the eclipse. I'm going to use the eclipse to prove to these guys that I am in fact a magician. Now let's put it in our notes. What Twain is really saying in this parody, and of course what he's making fun of, and Twain did this regularly, you'll remember in our study in our freshman year of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, he played the same game. People who are gullible, people who are willing to listen and believe in anything. And here, of course, he's playing the same game. Notice the suggestion is that people of the time that Hank actually comes from, that is to say the 19th century, are not so consumed with all of this superstitious nonsense as people who lived back in the time of King Arthur. Well, here we go, 1197. Let's enjoy the story. See what happens next.
Clarence came in, subdued, distressed, and said, I hasted the message to our liege the king, and straightway he had me to his presence. He was frighted, even to the marrow, and was minded to give order for your instant enlargement, and that you be clothed in fine raiment, and lodged as befitted one so great. But then came Merlin, and spoiled all, for he persuaded the king that you are mad, and know not whereof you speak, and said your threat is but foolishness and idle laboring. They disputed long, but in the end Merlin, scoffing, said, Wherefore hath he not named his brave calamity? Verily, it is because he cannot. This thrust did in a most sudden sort close the king's mouth, and he could offer naught to turn the argument. And so, reluctant, and full loth to do you the discourtesy, he yet prayeth you to consider his perplexed case, as noting how the matter stands, and name the calamity, if so be you have determined the nature of it, and the time of its coming. O prithee, delay not. To delay at such a time were to double and treble the perils that already compass thee about. Oh, be thou wise. Name the calamity. I allowed silence to accumulate while I got my impressiveness together, and then said, How long have I been shut up in this hole? Ye were shut up when yesterday was well spent. It is 9 of the morning now. No, then I have slept well, sure enough. 9 in the morning now, and yet it is the very complexion of midnight to a shade. This is the 20th, then. The 20th, yes. And I am to be burned alive tomorrow. The boy shuddered. At what hour? At high noon. Now then, I will tell you what to say. I paused and stood over that cowering lad a whole minute in awful silence. Then, in a voice deep, measured, charged with doom, I began and rose by dramatically graded stages to my colossal climax, which I delivered in as sublime and noble a way as ever I did such a thing in my life. Go back and tell the king that at that hour I will smother the whole world in the dead blackness of midnight. I will blot out the sun, and he shall never shine again. The fruits of the earth shall rot for lack of light and warmth, and the peoples of the earth shall famish and die to the last man. I had to carry the boy out myself. He sunk into such a collapse. I handed him over to the soldiers and went back.
All right, let's pause for a moment. Hey, notice what your textbook does on 1197 in literary analysis at 2B for parody. Given the nature of the argument, Clarence describes, why does the formality of his language seem exaggerated? Notice as Clarence is delivering this information from King Arthur, he uses this really exaggerated language, which is again, of course, a way for Twain to make fun of the idealized way that we always think about King Arthur and his court with his knights and all of that. Of course, it's going to be very simple, right? Hank knows that an eclipse is about to happen, ironically, the very day that he is to be burned alive at noon. And so he says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to show to you the power that I have. Now notice the irony. We, the readers, obviously know that all of this is a joke, right? It's just that he knows something that the others don't. Of course, Clarence is going to faint out of fear. And now we're on 1198. And let's keep going with chapter 6, the eclipse, which is, of course, maybe the most famous chapter in this section in this novel. You're going to love this. Watch this.
Chapter 6, the eclipse. In the stillness and the darkness, realization soon began to supplement knowledge. The mere knowledge of a fact is pale, but when you come to realize your fact, it takes on color. It is all the difference between hearing of a man being stabbed to the heart and seeing it done.
Right.
In the stillness and the darkness, the knowledge that I was in deadly danger took to itself deeper and deeper meaning all the time. A something, which was realization, crept inch by inch through my veins and turned me cold. But it is a blessed provision of nature that at times like these, as soon as a man's mercury has got down to a certain point, there comes a revulsion, and he rallies. Hope springs up, and cheerfulness along with it, and then